Hi guys, and today I'll be playing A Writer's Muse, which is about a struggling writer, and a barista who is more than he appears. And I'm guessing this is the barista right here, so let's start. It was a chilly autumn morning that day. Leaves were scattered along the sidewalks, and the sky frowned a dreary gray. The last signs of summer disappeared with the dawning of the red, orange, and yellow leaves on the sidewalks. Like the sun being sucked away, shrinking away from the cold and making room for the winter. I longed for something new, something bright, something warm. The cold cut like a knife through my coat and slithered its way under my scarf. Even though I did not have any morning classes, I insisted on waking up early anyway. I thought that I could use the quiet of the sleepy town where I lived to write. But whenever I sat down somewhere and put my frozen fingers to the keys, nothing came. I needed inspiration. But despite the silence that filled the empty streets, my brain would not utter a word to fill it up. I crunched through the leaf-filled streets, clutching my bag and my scarf. I needed a change, and as I neared my usual morning coffee shop, I smelled something different. Cinnamon, hazelnut, and cocoa powder. I felt it. Warmth, comfort, kindness, something new. I stopped in my tracks and turned to where the smell permeated from. A new coffee shop sat there, a block or so from the one I usually frequented. It was nestled in a cozy nook, pushed back a little further than the rest of the shops in the street. Warm amber light flooded from its wide windows, and the door was invitingly propped open. The fragrant odor that first captured my attention wafted out from the open door into my nose. I swallowed hard. It was exactly what I'd been looking for. A new place where I could warm my hands and hopefully resurrect my creative spirit. Stepping into the warmth of the coffee shop, I had not a second thought or doubt in my mind. I knew that this is where I was meant to be. Inside of the coffee shop was warm and bright. Tables filled the room and had a cute wooden coffee bar stationed at the back of it. Even though it was warm, the coffee shop was surprisingly empty. Where was everyone? Wasn't that early, was it? I looked at the fall decorations covering every table and surface. Pumpkins and leaves and acorns displayed just for the season. But despite the amount of fun seasonal decor, there were still no people. I stepped up to the coffee bar, leaning against the counter curiously. Hello? A head popped up suddenly from the other side of the counter, startling me. Tender yet piercing green eyes stared back at me, surprised by my sudden reaction. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. The guy laughed, and my shoulders instantly relaxed. It's alright, I'm fine. The guy's long, messy brown hair fell into his face, and he tucked a strand a bit behind his ear. He smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg, and he radiated the same warmth that had first drawn me into the shop. The apron he was wearing was wrinkled, and he pressed the wrinkles out before closing his delicate-looking hands on the counter. The name tag was pinned to his apron. It read, Theo. What could I get for you? Simple black coffee. Ugh. Black coffee? Let me guess, you're tired, uninspired, and possibly depressed? Did I get it right? Yes. I knew it. No offense, of course. He punched my order in on the register and I handed him my money. I'll have to serve it up in a moment. Thanks. The bright-eyed man retreated into the cafe's mini kitchen and started rummaging through the cupboards, banging around cups and utensils as he went along. Despite his slightly rude remarks, I mean, he was right? He was still very charming, and it took me a few minutes to snap back to reality and find myself a seat in the shop. I picked a table near one of the main windows that had a clear view of the cloudy sky and the street. Finally, placed my laptop on the table and opened it up. This had to be it. This had to be the place where I could finally write something. Placing my hands to the keys, I hovered over them hopefully, hoping for the spark of inspiration to order up. The green barista set a mug of fresh hot black coffee down on my table and beamed at me. The cup of coffee smelled wonderfully, whisking away my slight irritation and instead turning it into joy. Cracking a smile, I took a hold of the mug in my chilled hands. I took a sip, and my mouth was instantly flooded with warmth and feeling. It was bitter, just the way I liked it. But there was something more, something different about it that I couldn't quite grasp. Something wonderful. Theo made his way back behind the counter, and as he left, I again smelt the warm, homely scents that clung to his sweater. A burning feeling spread in my face and in my heart. Setting down the cup of coffee, I turned back to my laptop, fingers finally ready to type. I began. After a couple of hours of non-stop writing and a half of a dozen cups of coffee, I finally retracted my hands from my laptop and sat back in my chair. Staring back at me on my computer screen was several pages of unedited, real writing. I shook, possibly from the sheer excitement or from the mass amount of caffeine I just ingested. I finally found it at last. My inspiration. I looked over at the barista, Theo, who was still puttering around the mini kitchen. Surprisingly, no other customers had entered the shop in the hours since I arrived, and so Theo looked to be trying to find anything in the kitchen that would keep him busy. I stood in a daze and walked over to the counter, hoping to share my good news with another human being. Placing both hands on the counter, I peered behind it and into the mini coffee shop kitchen, where Theo was now crouched. Those cookies did they look good? He removed a piping hot cookie tray from an oven, delicious looking cookies placed evenly in rows on its shining surface. I stared in awe at the scene before me. Theo turned, noticing my eyes glued on the cookies. His surprised face turned to a small smile. You want some? He taunted me by waving the baking tray around a little as he removed it from the oven. My eyes followed as he moved it back and forth. Yes. Theo stood up and set the tray of cookies over on one of the kitchen counters next to the oven. Almost forgetting completely about my accomplishment, I stood there patiently at the counter like a dog. I watched as he scrapped the cookies one by one from the tray and pushed them onto a ceramic plate. Here they are. He placed a plate of cookies down on the counter in front of me, and I stared on, mouth salivating. No, you don't have to just stare at them. Try some. He nudged the plate closer towards me, and I reached a hand out and grabbed one. They were delicious. I pushed one cookie after another into my mouth before Theo politely blocked my returning hand from mindlessly reaching for another one. Okay, they may be good, but not that good. He tucked the plate over in front of himself, picked up a cookie near the edge of the plate, and bit into it. Damn, these are good. He set the half-eaten cookie back down onto the plate, pulled it back behind the counter. I'm going to have to make more of these. I stared at him in a daze. With the morning light floating in from the windows and the orange overhead shop lights shining down on him, he practically glowed. I felt rejuvenated, invigorated. I felt like I, myself, was also glowing. I felt the urge to run, to sing, to dance, to write. Cookies really make you feel that way. I had found my inspiration. Turning back to my table and settling down on my laptop, I once again pressed my leaping fingers to the keys. I felt like I could write, and write, and write, and write. So my body grew heavy and I was forced into a sweet and artificial sleep. You slept at the coffee shop? What? Are we in a forest? When I regained consciousness, it was dark, and it was cold. I could hear the coos of birds and the chirps of crickets, forest sounds. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I found that I was in the forest. How had I gotten here? My hands grasped wet mud, and I pulled myself up with great effort. The forest around me seemed to stretch on forever. I had seen the forest all the time. It surrounded our small town, but I had never noticed how big it was until I was now thrust into its evergreen expanse. I spun around and around, trying to gather my bearings, but to no avail. Crunch. I heard something. Something from somewhere. But where exactly? I felt like an animal, wide-eyed and terrified in the dark. I was frozen in place, listening, waiting. Crunch. Again, I heard it closer. I spun to face where I believed the sound to be coming from, but saw nothing. Nothing except a dark shape among all the other dark shapes in the forest. I squinted, but it was already upon me. Shink. A gust of air blew through my messy hair as something heavy hit the muddy ground next to me. I jumped back, terrified, and where the shadow figure turned its piercing green eyes tore into mine. Theo stood there, slicked in cold sweat that was illuminated by the moonlight now beginning to filter through the pines. In his hand, he clutched an axe, the blade lodged in the mud where I had only been inches from seconds before. He grinned, a toothy, sly grin, not the kind of soft, sweet smile he had previously wanted. The sweet face that I had seen previously was now invaded with a devilish glee, a joy that he seemed to be getting from my fear. Seeing the axe in his hands, I immediately took off running. "Where are you going?" Theo called after me in the darkness of the woods. I blindly ran, feeling my way through the darkness, trying not to run into the thick trunks of trees or into the thorny berry bushes. Theo approached rapidly from behind, pushing through the shrubbery and stomping through the dark forest mud in his leather boots. What was he doing? Were they trying to kill me? Why? I grasped onto the trunks of the trees and pulled myself forward through the darkness. Was I about to die? I lay between a few wide pine trees, putting a good chunk of distance between me and him. I had to get away. I just had to get away from him. Suddenly my foot caught on a root and I was catapulted face first into the muddy ground. I lay there unmoving and prayed that he would simply not see me and pass by. Crunch, crunch. Crunch, crunch. He neared. I didn't breathe. I could hear him. He was so close. There was nothing I could do. Crunch, crunch. Oh! I was yanked up by my hair and out of the mud, face to face with my hunter, who just a few hours ago had been my inspiration. "Found you." He grinned, the scar on his lip curling as he pulled my head up. I writhed and wriggled, struggling against a seemingly iron grip. Did I not put enough stuff in those cookies or what? He tilted his head and peered into my wide eyes that were now filled with terror. Carelessly tossed me back into the mud, he then stood over me. His now muddied axe was clasped in both of his hands, the shiny blade glittering under the layer of muck. He pulled it up over his head, ready to bring it down at a moment's notice. Well, it's just too bad. Dying at the hands of your inspiration. The one you so dearly craved. Maybe that's a little ironic. Maybe a little touching. I shook. I couldn't get up. I was terrified. But nonetheless, I'm glad to have been the only splash of sweetness in your dull, depressing life. He smiled. I screamed. The axe was brought down to my head. Again, and again, and again, and again, until all inspiration was ground out of my head, and my blood pooled dark in the mud, almost like black coffee. The end. Thanks for playing. Okay, and that is the end of A Writer's Muse. The barista was a killer. Maybe he's a serial killer. Maybe that's why he doesn't allow other people. He just allows one victim at a time into his coffee shop every single day. How can you shove down cookies like that? I didn't know he put something in them, but yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Bye.